Let's get straight into it then. Joining us via Skype is Sunday Times book reviewer Kate Sidley. She's also the author of 100 Mandela Moments. Kate, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. You've put together a few holiday reviews. Let's start with Michelle Obama's Becoming. That's a bestseller that's breaking all sorts of records.
It really is. It's one of the really big books of the season, and I don't know if you can see it here. Beautiful, beautiful cover, lovely picture of her. And you can see it's quite a fat book, so it'll give you quite a lot of holiday reading pleasure. It is indeed a huge book. It was 700,000, I think, in the first day in the States, and it's been very well accepted here. I think it's selling really well in South Africa as well. It's her memoir. She's written about her childhood, right from her childhood right until sort of when they've left office at the White House. And it's a beautiful, beautiful read. I really enjoyed it more than I thought I would, actually. So it's partly a coming of age. It starts off with her in the south side of Chicago, and we meet her family and get a sense of how she came to be the person she is, with her stay-at-home mom and a sort of blue-collar worker dad. And yeah, so we get a sense of her from that point, and she takes us through her whole life, really. Through her meeting Barack and falling in love, her life as a student at Princeton, and then at Harvard. You know, she was a big overachiever in a lot of ways herself, not just as the first lady. So it's really well written. I really enjoyed reading it. She's got a natural sort of genuine warmth to her, and it comes across as quite intimate. She writes about things like her IVF, about her relationship, about her children, and about her misgivings of him going into politics and what it would do to her and his relationship and what it would do to their family. Mm-hmm. Carry on. Yeah.
Sorry, what's the feeling that you get when you finish that book? You've spoken about kind of intimacy that's there. When you put it down and you finish, what are you left with?
Well, you're left with a very frank picture of, I think, a really remarkable woman. I think that she really didn't have an easy life. Her father died when she was quite young. He had MS for a long time. And she's somebody who's obviously very driven. She's very organized. But she also really is a deeply caring person. And I think one of the things that's really phenomenal is to read about their relationship. Because to be in a relationship with someone who is obviously the president of the United States, and you know, they started off as two young lawyers together. It's really an incredible story about how they made that work. And I mean, he actually didn't just take the decision to run for office without discussing it with her and without getting her absolute buy-in. And you know, they talked about what it would do to their family and how difficult it would be for the girls and so on. And I really think as a portrait of a relationship, it's quite fascinating. And I think a lot of people will kind of enjoy that aspect of the story as well.
Let's go to South African books. Malusi Chabalala's Everyday Zulu came after a Facebook post.
Yes, it did. I don't know how many of your of the viewers know this book and his previous Facebook post. So Malusi Chabalala is a Zulu speaker and somebody who's involved in the sort of creative and advertising and communication industries. And he's got a lovely, lovely style. He started off writing a sort of daily thing on Facebook, mostly for his friends. I think he did it 6 days a week to start with. So he'd pick a Zulu word, and then he would give an explanation of the word. But it's not a kind of a vocabulary lesson. So for each word that he picks, he does tell you what the word means, but then he goes into all these different layers of what it signifies. And he's really, really very clever. I mean, he sort of pokes fun at South African society in so many ways, but he also tackles really kind of difficult and challenging aspects of society, like race, like politics, like gender and so on, but in quite an entertaining way and quite a brave way. He also introduces us to his family. I can read you a little one if you like, just to get a sense of it, if you think that would be okay. So this word that he's talking about today is Tuma, and he writes, Tuma means send, as in Brahu and Cyril's Tuma Mina, send me. He says, while Tuma Mina is a great declaration of your commitment to playing your part in building a better South Africa, it's a teenager's nightmare. Parents will Tuma you until you want to cry. It used to happen to me, now I'm doing it to my kids, especially the teenage boy. I wait for him to get deep into his video game, book, TV show, movie, and then I send him on some nonsense errand. You can see the murder in his eyes. It's the circle of life, I tell you, little man. And he goes on like that. So he's really, I think he's a fantastic writer. and a great South African. You know, he has these sidetracks into all these different elements of South African life, and you really, even, I mean, if you're wanting to learn Zulu, obviously it's fantastic, but even if you're not, it's a kind of a fantastic sort of portrait of Zuluness and of South Africanness and of humanity more broadly. So I would recommend it. And it also makes a fantastic Christmas gift. I think it would be a really nice sort of stocking filler Christmas present for a family member or a friend.
Would that be limited to people in South Africa, or is it a book that can travel quite far?
I would say it's probably more meaningful to South Africans, because he goes into quite often into the little things that have happened in the news, like he's, you know, Johan Rupert, or, you know, somebody else that they would maybe not know about. So it's probably really for South Africans. But I think that you don't have to be a Zulu speaker or a potential Zulu speaker to enjoy it. I think everyone would enjoy it.
Okay, staying with local titles, we've got a well-known media name, Vanessa Raffaeli, has a book +1. It's said to be a novel, but there's echoes of real life in there with her protagonist.
Yes, there is, because one of the protagonists, Lisa, she is actually the deputy editor of a glossy magazine, and it's set in London, and she's sort of an up-and-coming media person, and it's really quite fun in that sense. It's a sort of a bit of a social commentary around the magazine and media worlds as well. And the way the story unfolds is that her best friend, Claudia, is an up-and-coming, almost A-list actress. And Lisa is the sort of slightly less powerful in terms of celebrity culture, because she's only a kind of magazine editor. And so she's the +1 of the title. And she gets invited along with Claudia to Mykonos, to a yacht. And, you know, there's a lot of this sort of glitzy glam element to this book, which is quite fun to read about. So the two of them go on this weekend away to this yacht in Mykonos. And something happens there, and that's kind of what gives the story its kind of energy and its mystery and its sort of what happened and something went wrong. It's twists and turns and so on. But it's also, again, it's a really fun read. It's an easy read. It's a one sort of page-turning read, but it's got that nice element to it where there are these themes that underlie that, which sort of give it a bit more depth. And it's nicely written. There's it's one of the themes is around sort of a Me Too kind of theme. There's somebody there who's an older TV star who's been quite well known and is possibly a sexual predator, abuser, and so on. So it touches on quite a lot of interesting themes. And although the first part is set in 2008, the second part is set sort of 10 years later, so it's contemporary, and it comes to Cape Town as well. So, you know, it's a really nice read. I would recommend it as a fun page-turning holiday read with a little bit more depth to it than maybe your average sort of total beach lounger read. So, yeah, it's a good one.
So another book that's been making headlines quite a lot is Gold Diggers by Yah-Tchi. Also has echoes of reality based on Zimbabwe's economic crisis.
Yeah, it does. I mean, this is also set about 10 years ago, and it starts off with a group of people in a quantum coming down from Zimbabwe to South Africa as illegal migrants. And it follows the stories of these people, and it's really a fascinating book. I enjoyed it very much. Very well written. It also touches so
Kate Sidley, the Sunday Times book reviewer. It seems like we are struggling to hear. I think we'll just try one more time, Kate, if you can tell us a little bit more about Gold Digger. If not, we'll move on to our next segment.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm not sure where you lost me, but this is the story of these migrants who come down from Zimbabwe illegally, and we first of all discover, you know, what they're coming for or what they're leaving, and there are a whole lot of different reasons. They're looking for somebody, or economic reasons, or to be with someone that they love, or to get away from somebody in Zimbabwe. You know, they've all got their own personal reasons, and quite beautiful. They get individual stories. And this story really they're not being narrative. And it allows us to touch on all sorts of different things, xenophobia, drugs, child trafficking, and various things. And you see the struggle of migrants coming to the country. Having said that, it's not a downer of a book. It's got a kind of a social element to it, a sort of a social interest element to it, and it's quite emotional. It's actually a really nice read. It's a really interesting read because they land up in sort of different areas of life, and you get these little insights. I mean, somebody lands up in Pilbara, somebody lands up in a domestic work, somebody sort of makes good. So you do get these different aspects of people's lives, which makes it quite interesting to read.
Let's go to Unsheltered now by Barbara Kingsolver. Tell us about that.
Well, Barbara Kingsolver, I don't know how many of your viewers would know her, but probably quite a few of them from her book, The Poisonwood Bible, which was, I think, in 1998 or 99, quite a long time ago. But it's a real classic, and she is one of the sort of top authors in the world, really. And she's got a new book out called Unsheltered. It's quite interesting because it happens in two different time frames. The one is 2016 and the other is the late 1800s. And it follows these two families, and what they have in common is that they live or lived in the same house, obviously not concurrently, over time. So it's a book that deals with a lot of issues around the sort of failed American dream, but in quite an interesting way. So the family that is currently living in the house, they sort of fallen on reasonably hard times. One of them is a journalist who can't find work, and the husband, the partner, is a lecturer, and they've moved into this house in a place called Vineyards in New Jersey. And the house is really decrepit and it's falling down, and it's going to cost them so much more money than they expected. And they've got all these family issues. They've got adult children with their issues and a dying father. And so it brings up all these interesting issues around sort of medical costs and how we're talking about how when we're sheltered, how we're kind of held and taken care of. And this family really is in quite in sort of teetering on the brink. And then the other story, which is sort of interwoven with it, is the story of a man who lived in the same house with his wife and his wife's mother, and he's also kind of teetering in this new marriage and trying to make it work and trying to make a living, and he's a teacher in a school and a scientist as well, and he is not allowed to teach Darwinism, and it's his struggle as well with his own principles, but he also sort of needs to support this family, and he meets a woman who lives nearby who's also a scientist and a biologist and so on, called Mary Treat, and she's in conversation with Darwin through her letters, and she's just an amazing sort of companion to him, even though he's much more so than his wife. And it's a really interesting book, and it deals with issues around sort of social issues, and she always does in her book. She has social and political and economic issues that come through, but what I like about it is that it doesn't overwhelm the personal story, the family stories that we're talking about and that we're reading about, that are the ones that really grab the reader. So this book is a little bit of a heavier read in that it's a little bit longer, and you have to deal with these sort of two time frames. Having said that, I thought it was really good and really worthwhile, so if you're looking for a good quality read, I would recommend Barbara Kingsolver's Unsheltered.
Kate Sidley, thanks so much for your time on SABC News, giving us a review of books that she believes should be in your holiday reading list. Wide range there, international and local. It's time for a short break.